Welcome to Abundance. You guessed it, a podcast dedicated to all things surrounding dance. I am Kristen.
And I am Hannah, and we are two best friends who are brought together by this art form.
Please join us in 5, 6, 7, 8.
Greetings, everyone. Welcome to our second in-person episode together. I'm currently visiting Kristen in her New York City apartment, and we had a really, really fun morning. Do you want to tell everyone what we did?
Yeah, so we got up at a good decent hour, even though we went to bed a little bit late last night, but that's okay. Who needs sleep? No, just kidding. We're actually going to talk about it today. You do need sleep. But we went for a nice little stroll. It's pretty nice weather today. The sun was shining, and it is, of course, spring now. And so the city has really beautiful cherry blossom trees, and there's just lots of tulips and daffodils around. It's really beautiful.
Kristen doesn't drink coffee, so she got her chai tea, but I am a huge coffee drinker, so probably these next couple of days, I'll be dragging her to all of the coffee shops.
Yeah.
Not Starbucks, though.
No.
It's good to support local business.
Yeah, you got to do like the real deal, not the big chains when you're in the city, at least personal opinion. But
Agreed.
Then we got really good bagel sandwiches, and we sat in Washington Square Park, and it was just a really nice morning, kind of strolling around and getting some good little things to snack on for a late breakfast.
Yeah, and we saw some really adorable doggies everywhere. I wanted to pet them all, but COVID. Can't pet some dogs.
It's a pretty solid morning, I'd say.
Yeah, it was so fun. So much fun to be in person again with Kristen.
Yeah, we're excited for the rest of the weekend. So, yeah.
Today we're talking about injuries because as dancers, we have all probably experienced some sort of ache or pain, whether big or small. We have all experienced something. We have talked in our previous episode a little bit about injuries, but we wanted to go further in depth and bring some causes and vulnerabilities to how you can get injured and ways to prevent an injury.
Yeah, and of course, we want to just throw that out there that, of course, we are not experts or medical professionals. So all of this, while we do have some education surrounding it, we're not those experts. So of course, if you are seeking more personal advice or you need medical attention, definitely go to those people in the field and don't just rely on us.
Yeah, as much as we know about a lot of injuries and things, yeah, please don't listen to this as your medical go-to.
Yeah, but we do hope that we can at least bring a little insight to the topic today.
Definitely.
So in terms of causes, there's really quite a few ways injuries can happen. You can become injured through even non-dancing activities. So that's something that you have to be careful of because our body is our instrument. And so you have to take into consideration certain activities that are more high risk, like perhaps ice skating or skiing, snowboarding, kind of some of those more extreme sports where there's the potential to get hurt. And of course, even just day-to-day activities, just being careful because really you never know what could happen. But in terms of dance specifically, it's also really easy to get injured during a class or a rehearsal. And these can be sudden, traumatic, or accidental injuries. So like I said, something just very much spur of the moment, kind of maybe wrong place, wrong time, not great conditions, perhaps a very slippery floor or something like that. But then injuries are also often due to overuse or being tired. That's a really big thing for dancers. We often tend to overwork ourselves and don't give enough rest time. And often we don't even have a choice, right?
Yeah, I think sometimes we want to continue to do our work and we want to keep dancing that we forget we need to take care of that instrument. So a lot of times dancers will just push their bodies to their limit and end up working through something that could be really traumatic in the long term. Like maybe it doesn't hurt that bad now, but if you keep ignoring it, it's just going to get worse and it could turn into something bigger than what it is in the moment.
Right, yeah. I think that's really true to serious dancers, this wanting to kind of push through and almost thinking that it shows a sign of strength of who you are as a person, like, oh, I can just work through this, I have a high pain tolerance, it's going to be fine. But that's not always a sign of strength. Sometimes a sign of strength is actually taking a step back and being a little bit more, I want to say, like, logical or forward thinking about the situation.
And just almost conscientious,
Yeah, and
you know?
either whether it's being preventative or just tackling something as it's kind of like first
Like
occurring.
yeah, if you're experiencing the pain, your body's telling you that something's wrong. Maybe you deal with it right away instead of, oh, I'll just dance on it a few more classes and see if it
Right.
gets better. Like, you really want to treat something right when it doesn't feel right. Like, sure, we all experience soreness and, little aches and pains here and there, but when something feels off to you and it's not your normal day-to-day pain, you should get it looked at, I would say.
Yeah, and there's a certain level of intuition, I think, that comes with being a dancer. And so definitely, like Hannah, you were just saying, you can tell usually in your body whether, okay, I'm just really sore today, or you know that maybe you had a really hard class or rehearsal recently, and so it makes sense that you're going to be in pain and experiencing soreness pretty regularly. But knowing how to differentiate something that's concerning or potentially an injury versus those normal aches and pains, definitely. And then too, just the whole being tired thing, which we said. So yes, you do need sleep. Um, if you're just so overworked, if you're not getting enough sleep, you're more likely to land wrong from a jump. Or when you're tired, you don't activate your muscles the same way, and you don't always work with the best technique. And when your technique slips, that's when you're really prone,
Yeah.
yeah, to experiencing an injury.
Yeah, also not having enough sleep will often deter you from focusing. I think that's another big one. I know when I didn't sleep enough the night before and I was trying to dance, I wasn't at my best because I remember, like, I think it was in Dance Essentials, we learned that dance is 90% mental and 10% physical.
Mhm.
If you're not completely focused in what you're doing, in the combination, in the movement, whatever, there is more of a chance that, as you were saying, Kristen, you could get injured, and that's really scary.
Yeah, and I'd say it's like with the technique kind of slipping and maybe missing some of those transitional moments, but also even then some of the things, like, say if it's not great conditions, like I mentioned before, and it's a really slippery floor, but you're just really kind of out of it that day and you're not paying that close attention, you're more likely to do just something, I don't want to say stupid, but something kind of, I guess, maybe careless is the word.
Yeah.
Like just like slipping or maybe like knocking into someone or
'Cause
just doing.
I feel like when you're at your best, you're very cautious to your surroundings, whether that is your environment, but also the other dancers around you. And that also brings up, rehearsals. And in that situation as well, like, what if you can't remember the choreography? What if you accidentally bump into someone? What if you injure someone else?
Right.
So it's just important to just keep that all in mind. Like, sleep is a huge thing, but also eating, what you're putting into your system also is a big thing too, because you want to make sure you get through your
Mhm.
rehearsal in class.
Definitely. I think something that's kind of important to bring up too is specifically partnering when it comes to injury, because I think that that's something that is not really thought about as much. But when you have partnering, whether it's a guy and a girl or even it's girl and girl, no matter who it is, you are relying on that person and you're sharing weight. And so you need to make sure that both parties are very much like aware of what's going on and kind of with it, I guess you could say. Like,
Yeah, and
because
being committed to what you're
especially,
doing.
yeah, when you have things like lifts and stuff, if someone is either just, not totally paying attention, or even something like, this is a common thing if we're speaking about specifically like a male and woman partnership, like a pas de deux or something. A lot of times men are overworked because of how few men there are at different schools and in companies, that they're being pulled in a bunch of different directions, having to do a lot of partnering. If they're really sore or being overworked, their upper body, and then they're having to do a lot of lifts, that can potentially be dangerous, because of course you don't want someone to be dropped in the lift. And unfortunately, at times that happens. And that is part of the learning process. And that's why you have spotters and you learn lifts a certain way. But I think that that's just something to keep in mind too, because in a partnering position, in a partnership, you have to rely on that other person too. So it kind of forces you as a dancer to not only be responsible for yourself, but you have to be responsible for others too. There's that kind of like added pressure depending on what type of work you're doing or the repertoire you're rehearsing. So I don't know. I just think that's interesting to bring up because it extends beyond yourself.
It does. And also there's that trust factor too. You have to have trust in the other person. Are they doing everything they can to be completely committed and at their best? So as a team, you're working together. It's not one or the other. You both need to pull your weight in a reciprocated kind of manner, right?
Yeah. And I think with that too, communication is important because you know what? Every day might not be the same. And one day, perhaps someone is really experiencing something and they might just need to mark a section. But that could actually be better off. You know, as dancers, we're always told to do things full out. And like we were talking about earlier, we try to push through things. But you know what? Sometimes you might need to just communicate with your partner like, hey, you know, this one really hard lift we've been working on, can we just mark it today? If that feels best for someone, I think that that's something that should be respected. And it's probably honestly for the best, as long as it's not coming from a place of laziness and just, you know, not wanting to work hard, that kind of thing. But if it's coming from the right place, I think those kinds of things should be honored and respected, that it's for the better kind of
the better good of the partnership.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think communication not only with your partner but also with the rehearsal director too. That's just something, you know, if you're working with other people, it's absolutely important to just talk to everyone around you.
That's so important. I think too, you bring up a good point, especially from an educator perspective. So just with everything I'm learning in my degree program and stuff, it's so important to communicate with your teacher when you're dealing with an injury. And that's, like I said, even when it's a small scale injury, even if it's not something full blown where you have to be sitting out or not doing certain things, you want to communicate with your teacher so that way they don't continue to push you in an area that's going to further hurt you. Like, for example, if I didn't know, Hannah, like you were experiencing, say, like a little back injury or something, and I'm on you all class about your penche, and I'm like making you try it over and over and giving you a lot of corrections surrounding that, like that's not doing you any good. But as the teacher, if I don't know that you have that back injury, like I'm going to be on you if I see something, but perhaps maybe you're marking it a little bit more because like you're in pain. But it's important to be able to communicate those things because of course a teacher is never going to intentionally try to like exacerbate something you already have it going on. But
it's also a sign of respect. I feel like both ways. So then the teacher knows to not push you, but then you also are showing that you're not trying to be lazy.
Yeah, respect to the teacher, right, exactly. And that you're doing the best you can under the circumstances. I think that's a really great point. And then just kind of one other, I would say, big cause of injuries overall. I mean, of course, there's many causes, but is if you've been injured before. That's really honestly a common thing. If you've maybe sprained an ankle before, you're a lot more vulnerable to kind of repeat and redo that injury in a way. So that's why I would say, and I'm sure you know a lot more about this honestly than I do just from personal experiences, but that's why you really have to commit to like the PT exercises you're given, how long you're supposed to rest and stay off of whatever it is, depending on the severity of the injury. But you definitely want to make sure that you're fully healing, or else you're just going to be more and more susceptible to having the same thing happen over again.
Yeah, I can personally talk about that just because when I subluxated my shoulder joint, which meant it didn't completely go out of the socket, I didn't completely, have the separation between my shoulder and my arm, but it still came out of the socket for a second and popped back in, and that hurt so bad. And I realized after I went to PT that they were like, Hannah, you're going to be more susceptible to redoing this because it went out once. There's a good chance it will happen again. So you just need to be super aware of it and super on top of it. And staying off of it or modifying certain exercises in order for it to rest is so important, because if you just keep going and going and going, you're probably going to prolong the injury and then inevitably make yourself more susceptible to re-injuring in the future potentially. So
Right. And while it can be challenging, I'm sure, to say if you're told you need to stay off of something for a longer period of time, or there's a certain movement you're not allowed to do, like prescribed by your doctor, while it can be really hard up front to say, okay, you know what, I'm not going to do this for said period of time, I think in the long run, it's totally worth it because, like you said, I mean, how frustrating. I mean, I haven't really experienced this personally, but I can't imagine how frustrating it would be to just be continually dealing with the same issue over and over a longer period of time. And if you add up all of those like shorter periods of time where you're affected by the injury, it probably will end up surpassing that original time of just,
right.
Rest.
Yeah, right, which is why you need to kind of attack the injury right away, figure it out, let it heal so then it doesn't repeat itself. So then you're not out for a longer period of time in the future.
Yeah. And going off of that, so that's definitely more of like a vulnerability just in general. Unfortunately, there are kind of specific vulnerable populations, I would say, for injuries. And one of those we recently have been talking about in my NYU classes. We've been having some lectures with the ABT, American Ballet Theater, physical therapist, Julie Dougherty, and she's so knowledgeable. I really love having classes with her. And we've been talking about children going through growth spurts. That's really a time when injuries occur a lot. So for girls, this is typically 11 to 13 years old. And for boys hit puberty a little bit later. It's more of the 12 to 18 kind of time frame. And basically, the bones are growing first, and the muscles and tendons have to play catch up. So at this point, students are experiencing a decreased level of flexibility, and that's really what comes into play with injuries, because you have to kind of be almost proactive, I want to say. And I think some of that, should stem from the teacher's end of being aware of the age group you're working with. And if you're working with this specific population, while they might not all be hitting their growth spurt at the same time, maybe looking out for those who seem like they are, or just making some overall modifications for the entire class. So by that, I mean, it's important to modify training. So you want to incorporate more dynamic stretching in your training and less static stretching. That's a lot healthier. And things like développés, grand battements, where we're told as dancers, obviously to work with our maximum flexibility as long as we're maintaining placement. You really want to kind of take a step back with students at that age and have them actually lower their legs often. And with that too, it's just really important to communicate and explain to the kids almost what's going on, because this can be a frustrating period, because especially if you're kind of on that like pre-professional track, that's kind of at that age where you're starting to maybe go to summer programs, or you're just becoming a lot more serious about what you're doing and about dance, that kids can often see this as a setback.
Mm-hmm.
But you have to, I think, as a teacher, if you're working with this group, explain to them why they have to kind of change their expectations and approach at this point, and that it's only going to be temporary, that they don't have to do these things forever. But like sitting in their splits all day at this age and trying to really, go for their maximum flexibility and everything in class is really not a healthy approach. Yeah.
I also, going off of that, bringing up point work and when it's right to go up on point.
Yes.
I think you've got girls, especially at that age, where they're like, I really want to get my point shoes, or my friend has their point shoes before me, blah, blah, blah. I think that's a time where teachers really need to educate their students that everyone is developing and getting stronger at their own pace, and you can't really compare your friend to yourself, depending on who's actually strong enough for it. That's a lot of ankle strength and
a lot of balance.
There's so much that goes into it. And so if you're giving a kid, also let's talk about development. You can't really, you shouldn't have a kid go on point when she's like 9 or 10 or younger than that. And there are some kids that I think have gone on point and have gotten injured from being on point too early. So it's so important to make sure that they're exercising and doing all the proper things to get them at their right.
Like the right point in their training.
Right point. Point. But it's so true. You can't force a kid, or not even force. You can't just feed into the want for the point shoe.
No, I'm actually so glad you brought up point. That's such a great point. What? Can't stop saying point. Oh my goodness. But it's so true because especially so for ballet dancers, you're a young kid, getting your point shoes, your first pair, that's such a for me that was such a dream. I literally
had a student today ask, have you been on point?
Yes, I did actually. I was teaching and a young girl asked me about that. It's just something that goes with the whole package. It's something that young dancers dream of. And
you see beautiful professional ballerinas on point in their tutus.
I mean, once you're on point for a while, it definitely loses the glamour. That's for sure.
You get the bunions and the bruised toenails,
the blisters, but it can be a real emotional journey for children, especially like you said, if their friends and everyone else seems to be going on point around them, but maybe they aren't. But definitely educating your students and trying to instill patience in them is so important. And as a teacher or a school director or whatever your role is, remaining grounded and not just giving into, so and so is so sad, I just want to see them happy. Like you have to stay grounded, and you have to have certain expectations and qualifications that the students must. There needs to be something to kind of hold them accountable and say, these are the markers you have to meet. You have to be able to do X, Y, and Z, and then you can get your point shoes. So there's just a whole host of, once you start point, that just opens up for so many other potential injuries. Not even if you're not ready for point, even someone who's really strong and should be on point is, there's room for more injury once you're adding this kind of additional factor to the mix. So I'm so glad you brought that up. I think that that's such an important thing. And then just to touch on to other groups that might be a bit more susceptible or vulnerable to injury is people with poor nutrition or eating disorders are a lot more vulnerable to things like stress fractures. And just like Hannah was saying before, just if you're not getting the proper nutrition and you're really fatigued in class, all those kinds of things, it's kind of a one thing feeds into another, and you're just at higher risk.
And also going back to your body being your instrument, it's like an actual instrument. You have to have it tuned. It has to be sounding correctly in order for you to produce what you're trying to produce, whether that be music or dance or whatever. And as a dancer, our bodies are what we need to keep strong and in tune. And if they're not in shape and not being cared about, you're not going to do what you're setting out to do, essentially, right? Like, I don't know. That's what's so hard and sad about eating disorders and not feeding yourself properly, because you're not giving yourself the means to success.
Yeah, definitely. It's a very challenging thing, but just self-care all around, making sure that you're really taking care of yourself to
eating, sleeping,
prevent anything.
Water,
all
rolling
all
out,
those things.
stretching.
Yes.
I'm a culprit of that.
Yes, which we will get into shortly. Actually, we have just a few little tips and tricks for you guys to hopefully try to keep yourself, as Hannah said, kind of well-tuned. But want to take a short break?
Yeah, let's take a break. We'll see you soon.
And we'll be back with some tips.
Welcome back.
Welcome back, friends. Hannah and I got a little tangent about sharing some stories during the break, but we're back now to talk a little bit more about prevention. And we kind of touched upon some of these things already, but just to reiterate, some important things to keep in mind is, of course, oh my gosh, adequate sleep and rest.
There it is.
Hydration, so important.
Hydration station.
Yes, some good hydration and a good proper diet. And even with that, there's certain foods to help actually if you're experiencing with cramping or different things. Shin splints, like definitely nutrition plays a big part in your overall health. So looking into those things perhaps too, if you experience anything, particular to yourself, and if there's any certain foods or food groups that could help you in that way.
Yeah, also prevention in terms of cross training.
Yes. Cross training is a big one. You want to make sure to increase strength and just fix any muscle imbalances you might have. So muscle imbalances are a really big thing. Actually, that's yet again another cause, I would say, for an injury. Sometimes we have one group of muscles that
overwork.
Will overwork, or one group that's really tight and then the other is really loose, and just all of those kinds of things.
So yeah, you're recruiting different muscle groups instead of using it all equally, and I think that's a big thing, especially with dancers. We're not always, like, for example, this isn't really injury based, but it could be, I guess. Generally in a ballet class, for example, you're not doing as much cardio. So a lot of times we have doctors and physical therapists and professors, etc., telling us you need to get this much cardio in, whether that's walking or going on the treadmill or the elliptical, doing something that allows you to be completely well-rounded.
Yeah, that's a really great point, because unfortunately, dance classes, and I'd say specifically ballet classes, don't really prepare you for the stamina that you need for performances or doing a full-length ballet.
And without having the stamina, you could get injured, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And so ballet classes, it's a lot of short intervals, stopping and starting. So you really don't get that cardiovascular training. So it's kind of important to find things outside of class to get yourself ready for rehearsal seasons, because if you're just trying to jump into all of that without kind of anything to I guess like pull from, prepare you,
yeah.
that can be a lot on the body, and the body is incredible, and there are some moments where adrenaline will just kick in a certain circumstance, and you can amaze yourself with what you can do. Sometimes
you feel like a superhero.
You could do something, you're like, wow, I didn't even know I could do that. And that's what adrenaline does, and it can be a beautiful and amazing thing. It can really help you out in performances, but the thing is, you can't rely on that, and you're not going to have that adrenaline rush every single rehearsal that you're in. That's
right.
Not, like, you need a backbone to your...
And once the audience leaves and lights go down, you're doing your own thing again, you might end up feeling that injury. Like, maybe you just pushed through and it felt completely fine.
Right.
And then, ouch. So exactly, you just need that cross training and just being completely aware of what's going on in your body. And we were talking about this last night too. I struggle with this. It's just getting yourself on a schedule. Sometimes we have so many things going on in our lives, and you just need to make time for yourself, whether that is rolling out or cross training or seeing a doctor or fixing your mental and physical health, doing something that allows you to take care of that instrument, which is our bodies in dance.
Yeah, Hannah and I were kind of talking about the accountability factor with all of that, and now each of us have some personal goals right now, whether it be just small things, like rolling out, or doing some more like core strength and stretching or TheraBand exercises. We each have kind of some personal goals at the moment, and I was saying how, some of these things, they really don't take that long, but it's just establishing that routine, holding yourself accountable, and just saying, you know what, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do it every day. And even when I don't feel like doing it, I'm just going to push through.
Even if it's annoying in the moment, it's just good to get it over with, because in the long run, it helps.
It pays off. And I think too, well, of course, if this works for you, just, doing it whenever you can fit it in your day, that's best for some people's schedule. But for other people, especially with that accountability factor, just set it as part of your daily routine. Have it be like, okay, every morning I wake up, I'm going to set a 15-minute timer, and these are the exercises I'm going to do during that time span, or right before you go to bed, or maybe if before or after class, whatever it is, whatever works best for you. But if you're not someone who can stick to, okay, I'm just going to do it whenever I have the time, then really just making it a part of your day-to-day like set routine.
Yeah, I was also going to say how I feel like I'm not alone in this, but personally, as a dancer, I love to be with other people, and I get challenged by other people in the room and having an instructor. And sometimes when I'm by myself working out, I'm not as motivated. So, what has helped me, and I think this has helped you too, is when we kind of check in and see how the other person is doing. So if you can even have a friend, maybe you're not in class together all the time, but you are trying to have personal goals that you're doing on the side from your regular dance classes, have a buddy and be like, hey, did you do your goal today? And then it can just be kind of like we're holding each other accountable. So then you're not feeling alone doing it.
Yeah, that's a wonderful point, and I think it works really well. And with that too, like when the pandemic started and we were sent home from school and everything, Hannah and I decided to do a lot of workout videos over Zoom together, over FaceTime. We would just plan it into our schedules, and I think for both of us that was a really great way of
Staying connected, yeah.
Staying motivated, because like
we were really
said,
sad at that point.
That was a challenging point for so many people, and it was just, I think for many, a point of lack of motivation and just, you know, feeling down. And
just almost feeling like you need to give up, but you can't, because we had to finish our degree. We had to keep going, even though we were sent home.
Yeah. And of course, our busy schedules did take over eventually. We were both doing our own things, and we didn't stick to that forever, but we did have a nice chunk of time during that, like the end of our spring semester and into summer, that we were taking online dance classes together and doing yoga videos and ab videos and doing cross training, and it was really great. So I definitely would recommend, if that's something you've never tried before, to try doing so. And also, even my friends from home that I grew up with, we got together a few times outdoors, socially distanced, and did some like group workouts together too over the summer, which was really fun. It makes, for those of us to, like, if exercising feels kind of daunting to you, if it's not really something you necessarily look forward to, having that sense of like group community camaraderie can be really helpful and motivating. And it was just fun. I felt like I was getting to do something social during a very non-social period of time in my life, as well as I was getting in a good workout and everything. So whether it's with dancers, non-dancers, just find yourself a buddy. It can be a mom, a parent, a pet, like anyone. Maybe not a pet, but you never know. Get your pets to go in downward dog with you.
Yeah. When you were at my house, Vera went under you. My dog Vera went underneath Kristen when she was doing a plank.
Yeah.
Dogs will do it. Animals will do it.
Yeah. So just all of those things, really great things. Of course, you can't always prevent the onset of an injury. Sometimes they just happen. And that's the thing too. I think it's like, don't beat yourself up if you get injured. You can't say like, oh my gosh, like this is my fault. I screwed up. I didn't do all these things. I mean, I think it's important to be honest with yourself and say, okay, maybe there are some habits I need to fix, or maybe I do need to take better care of my body. But even if it feels like you're doing all of the right things, you could still become injured. So I think just reminding yourself of that, and not, overwhelming yourself and putting too much guilt and blame for not doing the right things is important too.
Yes, it is. And from my own experience, I broke my foot about 2 years ago, and I didn't do it while I was dancing. Actually, I was at a summer program. One of my friends, she was saying goodbye to me. She picked me up. I didn't expect her to pick me up. And then she just happened to place me back on my foot funny, and I completely rolled my foot and stepped on it, and that's how I broke my fifth metatarsal. And I've heard so many other dancers or gymnasts or athletes or whoever you may be, just you're not doing what your sport or your activity, and that's how you end up breaking it. So it's just sometimes the silliest
so ironic
things.
kind of.
Yeah. But I also found that during the time of my recovery from the injury, I learned a lot about myself, and I also found it to be a really beneficial time in my training, because I was observing other dancers while I had to sit, and I was writing papers about my injury. I remember in my modern class, and I was doing a bunch of different things. I I think I talked about this in another episode. I ended up taking Laban notation instead of tap, and I learned Laban. I didn't expect myself to learn note taking and movement, but I did, and it was a really beneficial skill, I feel like, to take.
And I'm glad she was in that class with me because I definitely needed a buddy and help with some homework assignments and studying for exams. And also, I'm glad you took that. Had you and Kate then to help.
Yeah, but it was that broken foot that led me to choose some of the things that I did. And I can honestly say now I'm just more aware of my body and what it needs in order to prevent it from getting injured again in that way. I don't know. It's just a very interesting time. But I learned a lot from watching other dancers and from observing. And I realized how much I loved movement and dancing more than I ever did before, because I was out for like six months or 5 months or whatever it was. Luckily, I had the rest of the summer to recover from it, so I didn't miss that much, and I was able to perform at the end of the semester. But oh boy, it was so tough to just be watching everyone do the thing that you love.
Well, it's so true. There's that saying that like you never know what you had until it's gone. And I think that's so true.
And I think that applies to the pandemic too right now. We didn't know. Everything happens, and sometimes we don't expect it at all, and then we have to just cope.
Right.
And then you realize, wow, I am taking things for granted.
Yeah,
maybe.
We take so much. Even I think, with the pandemic, we've realized just the small, even day-to-day things that we really took for granted. So it seems like it was a very eye-opening experience for you.
It was. And just on a broader scale, the pandemic, you and I were together every single day at school. We were constantly together, motivating each other, doing all these things. And then all of a sudden we had to just be apart from each other. And that's been super hard for me because Kristen's one of my closest friends. And it's just so interesting. And I just think that applies to all aspects of life, and the injury thing. Because you're my best friend. We have a whole big group of friends that we were so used to seeing, and now that we can't, it's like, oh wow, I really took just sitting together talking for granted almost.
Yeah, it's definitely been an adjustment, and of course it was kind of one of those things. It inevitably was going to happen anyways, because we were going to graduate and we were all going to kind of move to these different places and start our next chapter of life. But it definitely came at a moment that was unexpected and we couldn't prepare for it. And I think that that's the part that really kind of like ties in and parallels with injuries as well, because of course you never plan for an injury. That's not something that you can prepare yourself for. Really, it just happens when it happens. And
so
then,
it's just important,
like you said, there's just you have to adjust and you have to just figure out how to cope with it.
And I just think, like, lastly, that just brings us to living every moment to the fullest and doing the best you can, because you never know what could happen.
Right. And I mean, not to like take things kind of down a dark path, but unfortunately sometimes dancers have career-ending injuries. It's unfortunately the reality for some people. And so while it's absolutely devastating, sometimes you just don't really have a choice. And you just have to figure things out. And so really not taking for granted
the little things,
the day-to-day, the classes, the rehearsals, just everything.
The plie at the beginning of class.
That plie that you're like, another day, another plie. And you're like, how am I going to get through this class? I'm so tired, or my legs feel heavy. And that happens. Even when you love something, there's days where it's not going to be fun. There's days when it's going to be hard. There's going to be days where you maybe wish you were doing something else. Like, it's normal and it happens, but taking a step back, I think, on those days,
putting it into perspective
and reminding yourself why you love what you do, and trying, even if it's the small things, even if you've had a terrible class, but you say, you know what, this one thing out of class, like, I really enjoyed this one combination.
Or even the music that was playing.
Or you're like, you know what, I was wearing the cutest leotard today, just.
My hair looked good. I used to, when I was little, I was like, if I had a good bun, I was going to have a good dancing day. It was just like a theory.
I feel like that's such a thing though, for dancers. And I think that's why, too, you have that, like, there's always those dancers that redo their hair, like their bun or their French twist, like 6 times before class or something. And I think it's one of those kind of mental, like, ritualistic things. And for me, it was always like, if I had got a good warm up in, that's like, I knew, okay, like, I can get through class, it's gonna be okay. But if I had a day where something happened and I was running late or whatever, I was like, okay, well, it's gonna be a rough class today.
Or maybe I didn't eat enough or sleep enough.
Yeah,
It's gonna be a rough class.
Yeah. I can just picture, like, you know, staying up late the night before, like working on a paper or something, and just being up
Or a test.
a test, and you just like mentally are like, okay, ballet is gonna be rough tomorrow, or like 8 a.m. choreo, like oof.
But at least you know that and you have the awareness, and then you're like, okay, body, don't get injured.
Yeah. So I mean, like we said, each day is gonna
Have
its own
thing.
challenges. It's gonna
Yeah.
be its own thing, but still finding the joy in the little things and being present, because
And finding the light in the dark places.
yeah, you just never know what's gonna happen in life.
Oh.
Yeah.
Well, on that note, that was quite a lot. But yeah, if you have any injuries you'd like to share with us, or any questions, or anything that you can teach us about, always feel free to contact us at our email. And
Try to stay healthy and just keep taking care of yourselves. If you're still working under not the greatest conditions, if you're still dancing from home, which I know Hannah and I are both doing a little bit of still, to just make sure you're taking care of yourself and doing the best under the conditions, and yeah, just stay well, friends. Take care of your
stay well,
bodies.
stay strong, stay healthy. We hope all of your families stay well and healthy as well. Just be well, everyone.
Yes, wishing the best always.
Yes. Bye for now, friends.
Bye.
Thanks for tuning in to Abundance. We appreciate your support. We hope to have PK'd your interest. Feel free to contact us at abundancepodcast5678@gmail.com and give us feedback on what you'd like to hear. That is abundance without parentheses. Go dance yourself silly. Bye for now.
A special thank you to Richard DiFiore for our lovely podcast tune and Matt Mellish for our cover art.